next up, I'd like to invite our next speaker, and we'll have Isaac talk about the evolution of decentralized identity and just sort of how it's ready to make a big impact in our economy. So without further ado, please welcome Isaac.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here and share this with you all today. So I'm just going to share my presentation and dive right in. So yeah, as Kartik was saying, today what we're discussing is really the evolution of decentralized identity over the last couple of years, and the way that this community, the Ethereum Hackathon community, has really already started to see global impact and what we can go and where we can go from here. The first thing I want to call attention to is that there really has been a bit of a divergence since the 2017 crypto community at the start of some of these ETH global events. We were in the beginning, we started out building everything as a smart contract, making decentralized identities were just registries of account IDs of Ethereum addresses on the blockchain. At the same time, a lot of other crypto projects were just starting out, like all the lending and banking. Since then, both spaces have matured, but pretty much independently. And I think that it's because we're solving very different problems. In the decentralized identity space, we're solving the problems of identifying everyone, even where data is lacking. So the hundreds of millions of people around the globe that are excluded from traditional identity systems need an alternative way to identify themselves and just pull in all sorts of information that they can use to gain access to services. Traditional institutions like banks see these people as very high risk and expensive to onboard. Typically with communities like this, there's very high rates of fraud. The fraud's very unique. There's entire industries built around fraud in these markets. And as such, bureaus are not equipped to handle these individuals. Some of the examples are just like the introduction of the Serasa credit scoring system in Brazil. There's certain dynamics that just don't work there that that Experian had that did work in the US. There's families that will pool a credit profile and everybody shares the same credit profile. There's also the issues of Serasa only storing negative data about people. So there's no way for people to pull in any positive environmental data about them and their activities to strengthen their identities. So this problem is not necessarily solved by putting identity on chain. We have some problems which can be solved by blockchain solutions, like uniquely identifying individual people or individual families. Of course, public key infrastructure is a great fit for that. But when it comes to sourcing data to strengthen these individual identities, it's not like there's a load of data that we can pull from contracts to say, this person is a real person or anything about them. So when we after we onboard people to like a public key infrastructure for identity, we still have a significant challenge of sourcing data through traditional means to strengthen their profiles. And third, as far as complying with legal privacy frameworks, like LGBT is the law in Brazil, CCPA in the US, GDPR in Europe, it's very challenging to approach storing any of this data with a smart contract system. So I'd argue that they don't really need on-chain identities yet. And in addition to that, what we started out, like I was saying, is putting all of these identities on chain as like smart contracts and end user addresses, but it was very expensive and we weren't seeing a whole lot of value out of it. So I've pulled this graph from Google BigQuery. So this was Bloom's account registry contract in mid 2019. So every single person that signed up and downloaded the app, as soon as they signed up, we added a queue to broadcast a transaction that says, okay, we have a new user. This didn't really end up helping anything because these people weren't transacting on chain. They didn't need to have their identity registered as part of a smart contract. All they really needed was a public-private key pair to prove who they were. So you can see exactly when we realize, hey, we don't need to be spending this much every day registering every single new user on chain. That's not to say that identity is completely independent from the blockchain. It's off-chain, but it really is adjacent to the entire ecosystem. Everything in the decentralized identity space is being built using the same blockchain fundamentals as many other projects. So under the hood, a decentralized identifier is typically just a wrapped Ethereum wallet or Bitcoin wallet, and it's using the exact same message signing capabilities that are used for sending transactions, but it's only used for signing messages and doing things like updating keys and other DID operations. So I pulled a Trust Wallet in here because I mean, the same Trust Wallet libraries that you can use to make a fund holding account, you can use to make an identity wallet. And indeed, many identity wallets do use this under the hood. The space has matured a lot, as I was saying, since 2017. It's not just a collection of smart contracts and account registries like it was in the beginning. There is quite a bit of maturity here. So the W3C, Decentralized Identity Foundation, Trust over IP Foundation within the Linux Foundation, and more, we've all started really aligning on what the terms are for referring to not just individual, but also enterprise identity. There's the concept of an issuer, which issues a credential to a user or a holder. A holder can register a DID or a decentralized identifier. All the data that they get associated with their public key is stored in a data vault or a hub, and then that can be accessed by applications when the user consents to share. So the concept here, we heard from EY about the concept of attestations. And indeed, when we started out, we were referring to everything as attestations. But now, just to get you all familiar with the terminology, we're talking about DIDs for individuals, verifiable credentials for data that we're associating with DIDs, and verifiable presentations when users are sharing data with third-party applications. These are the important terms that you'll see coming up over and over again throughout the decentralized identity space now. How does it actually look to have data routed through a user's wallet? So this is just an example of, on the left, I have an identity wallet. On the right, I have an application that is requesting data from me. So inside of the QR is encoded information saying who is requesting data from you and exactly what are they requesting. So in this case, this website on the right is requesting information about my watch list status and my ID document verification and my email. So this information, as you can imagine back on the previous diagram, the data comes out of the data vault, it gets packaged, and it gets shared as a presentation to the third party. All data gets routed through users, and all recipients can verify that it came from the issuing party. As the space is becoming standardized enough that so that big tech is even getting involved. So verifiable credentials aren't just something you can do in the crypto space, but even on the Azure platform now, you can pull in an OIDC credential that you would use for a traditional authentication, and you can turn it into a credential and associate it with a Bitcoin-based DID. So we heard a bit 2 presentations ago about Microsoft's involvement in the space, and indeed they have adopted and are supporting a lot of the standards here. Big tech involvement is not always a huge plus in the decentralization space, but it is great for at least pulling in massive amounts of data that we'll need if we really want to see adoption here. I wanted to talk now about some places that we're already seeing impact from decentralized identity in the global space, around the world. So Goodworker is a company that is just launching, that they launched earlier this year, and they're a job and skills marketplace based out of India. In the short term, their goal is very simple. There's a ton of inefficiencies in the seasonal worker, blue collar marketplace for Indian workers. Say that you're an individual with experience in the textile space and you need a job for the next 6 months or so. Right now, that market is full of a lot of inefficient brokers and just overall challenges and high costs. So in the near term, what this platform is doing is using DIDs and verifiable credentials to give people reusable, verifiable data about their identity, where they live, what their skills are, and what their income is. In the near term, this will allow them to find better jobs, but in the long term, it allows them to get instant access to any adjacent service using the same data. You can use the same data that you would use to get a job to get a loan or to get a home. So this is an example of how decentralized identity is already having an impact on on the ground for seasonal workers in India who they don't have ETH or crypto or anything, but what they do have is DIDs and verifiable credentials. On the enterprise side, we're also seeing adoption. So Tristana is a company based out of Southeast Asia, offices in China and Singapore, where they're building a cross-border trade network. So here, it's not data that is being associated with individuals, but when buyers and suppliers transact on this platform, they're actually building up a rich decentralized identity profile containing information about what they're qualified to trade, who they're trading with, their volume of trade, and they can use, again, all of this same reusable, verifiable, rich data to get access to adjacent services. So a shipper might, or a supplier might want to get access to financing on their invoices even before their goods arrive in the next port. All of this is possible if we have this decentralized, rich data ecosystem. A third place that we're already seeing a lot of global impact is in the health field. So again, in Southeast Asia, we're seeing a lot of travel restricted for workers that are trying to travel across borders or get into job sites. So governments and labs are already working together to see how can we use decentralized identities and verifiable credentials to give people the ability to cross borders, get onto job sites, and open up borders that are currently closed due to risks of infection. So this is something that is, of course, very helpful right now. But what's more interesting to me is imagine now that we have these doctors' offices that are equipped to give you portable, verifiable health information about yourself that you take custody of. What are the possibilities that you could do with that type of information? To me, anything involving the research space where I can actually consent to give my data for different medical studies, or just making it so that I can move between doctors' offices quicker. Making this data reusable has a lot more implications than just the near-term benefit of improving cross-border travel. As I was saying, that this is all really possible due to the ETH Hackathon community. I've been working with people in this space primarily that I've met through hackathons. My first went back a few years ago when I quit my normal job to become a Solidity developer. It was after I joined the FDev subreddit hackathon. Soon after that, I was at the ETH San Francisco hackathon where I met all the people that I ended up working with for for my career until now. Same with ETH Berlin and DevCon and ETH Denver and ETH New York. So there's many more ETH events than just the ones on the screen. These are just all the ones that I have specific memories of and partnerships that have grown out of this Ethereum Hackathon community. To me, it's absolutely the most important thing, in my career and also in this space. It's also true that the Decentralized Identity Foundation companies, many of the people that are working there and that you'll find in the Decentralized Identity Foundation Slack met each other through this community as well. So a lot of the companies that are listed here on the right, these people started out in the straight Ethereum space, but have now branched off into building decentralized identity technology. And this really brings me back to my original point of this divergence. So we have the 2020 crypto community, which is incredibly mature, tons of value locked in it. And we have the 2020 decentralized identity community, which similarly is onboarding tons and tons of individuals, but these two aren't really talking to each other. DeFi doesn't have necessarily a big need for identity yet. It's more of a nice to have, but it's not essential to how these protocols are functioning. What I want to understand is what can we build together? So we have all these people that we're onboarding, the unbanked, the underemployed, the people that can't travel. And on the other side, we have all of these DeFi products that people are locking value into. What can we do if we can bring these two concepts together by bridging the decentralized identity and the decentralized finance spaces? I want to call out two of the project submissions we actually got from this hackathon, which were particularly exciting to me. So the first one is Trafiguard. They call themselves an inclusive supply chain trade finance tool. You'll notice is directly analogous to that Tristana use case that I mentioned a few slides ago. The goal of this is to make it so somebody can take their verified identity through a decentralized identity platform. In this case, they were using the Bloom application to prove the person's credit worthiness on the platform. So first, first an individual can say that there's a seller that has goods that are on their way to a buyer's location, but they want to unlock some funds before the goods have actually been delivered. They can provide all of the verified documents to this platform to say, I have this credit score, I am this person, and these are some verified documents showing that I have goods on their way to the destination. They can then actually lock up, lock up funds in a compound contract and borrow against it at a variable rate depending on their creditworthiness. So this is really only possible if we can bring together the data from the industries and the data from the individual people at the companies together with the DeFi protocols to allow for this type of dynamic lending. One other submission that we got during this hackathon that I'm really excited about is called Molecule. So this protocol is making it so that people can prove their KYC status in a privacy-preserving way, again, using decentralized identity. What they get in return is an NFT representing their KYC status. What you can do then is bake into certain exchanges or DeFi platforms things that will only transact with you if you are holding a certain NFT. Very simple concept in theory, but like the idea that we could bridge all of the data from the decentralized identity ecosystem into something that mints NFTs and then restricts people's ability to interact with certain platforms based on those NFTs, to me seems incredibly powerful. What other things can we build together? This is really a question I have for this audience in particular. I've spent a lot of ETH Online understanding how can we actually compose all of the building blocks from DeFi with all the building blocks from decentralized identity. Can we provide even more widespread access to stable crypto assets for individuals that live in very unstable markets? Maybe there's exchanges that want to work with these individuals, but there is no traditional way to gather the data to do business with them. Are there other sophisticated DeFi products that could use this type of decentralized identity and just decentralized data in general to make decisions? What can we build using this type of data? And third, some sort of safer DeFi on-ramp for CeFi users. There's all sorts of people that have seen a lot of the hype around DeFi over the summer and want exposure to these systems, but they would prefer to have a platform with training wheels. Is there some sort of KYC platform opportunity that can pull in, the best of the decentralized identity community to make DeFi a bit more approachable? Some of the specific things that I was exploring even today is the concept of Aave's delegated credit vaults. So this is something that I would love to see built, where can a delegated credit vault holder who has deposited money into it, can they be doing their proprietary risk assessments off chain and only whitelist borrowers to draw from a line of credit on chain? So just a very simple thing where you take the decentralized identity on ramp with a delegated credit vault, and then you actually have an unsecured, fully integrated lending product. Many more ideas like this, but this is what I want to hear from you. So if you want to build something at the intersection of identity and crypto, please reach out and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. That was an awesome talk. I actually did not know that everything started in San Francisco for you. So this is amazing to hear, and I want to thank you for giving back to the community. Bloom has been a big part of the past few global events, so this is really awesome to hear. We have a few questions coming in from the chat, but one question I have for you is just in general, you sort of touched on this thing, but I guess I'm just curious to hear more thoughts on how do you kind of think about introducing a decentralized identity, or rather on the blockchain side of it, for geographies where there isn't sort of a government issued identity system, and a lot of countries are in that position. How do you think about that transition happening? Do you think that the government needs to sort of standardize that process for all the citizens first, and then we move it to online? Or do you think a peer-to-peer approach will just work at scale? Like, what kind of...
Yeah, well, there's certainly both those approaches, right? Because there's a lot of countries that are a lot more sophisticated with digital identity solutions, which can plug right in. Aadhaar has its faults with data quality, but it's actually very simple to transition an Aadhaar ID to like a DID with verifiable credentials. Or similarly, in Singapore, you have like SingPass, where you can have all this verified data about you already. But in those cases, I've actually been surprised to learn that there is fairly sophisticated digital ID solutions that we can turn into decentralized identity on-ramps in many countries. The alternative to that, the approach that I would love to see is how can, in my day-to-day life, when I'm transacting, say I go to the same shop every single day, and I'm buying the same groceries from the same person every week, can we in some way enable like a point of sale type solution at that vendor to say, like, I'm giving you a credential that says you clearly have stable enough income that you're buying from me groceries every day for the last 5 years. Why isn't that good enough to form the basis of an identity? So it's not just peer-to-peer staking, but it's like enabling the people at the edges to be issuing these types of credentials to each other.
And sort of just to clarify, is there a difference in this being called identity versus calling it issuing a credit?
Um,
Or I guess does my question make sense? It's more about like, I feel like in this scenario, it's like, oh, can I just pay you back later and you get a sort of that assurance, but does that help with the identity piece as well?
yeah, so the when you would really want to extend credit to somebody, right? If you're pretty sure that they're a real person that has like a steady income flow. So to me, like these credentials form the identity that would make it so that you would actually want to extend credit with it to this person. So using and then having just a very generic on ramp where this is somebody that I feel comfortable doing business with. Then perhaps I could whitelist them on my credit delegated credit vault, and they can take loans for me.
Got it. And I guess like the last question I have for you is sort of what have been sort of surprising things as you've tried to make this work for Bloom, and kind of what are things you found out that work, I guess, across the world, but not in the US and vice versa, and just sort of some interesting tidbits from there.
Oh, sure. So some of the early surprises were, let's see, I'll go back to an experience I had at ETH Denver, which is the shirt I'm wearing on purpose. It's when we arrived at ETH Denver as a sponsor, we had to register at the sponsor table with the Uport app. And I was thinking like, oh, that's interesting. I can get my credential from Uport, and I can sign in, and I can go to all the ETH Denver parties by using the Uport app. Um, for some reason, that experience sticks out in my mind as like interoperability being very important. Up until that point, I thought, okay, we'll just make the Bloom account smart contract, and people can interact within the Bloom ecosystem. But then we're not really benefiting from the fact that the folks like Uport and all of the 60 plus other companies in this space are out there working with governments, working with solutions. If we position ourselves as more of an interoperable solution, then anyone could just use the Bloom identity wallet in any case where they could use another one. So one of the early surprises was like, I didn't pay enough attention to interoperability perhaps in the first 6 months, but after that you can really benefit from the wider industry. And then I guess the other surprise doing this stuff abroad, like in Asia or in Latin America, is in Asia, I think a big thing is like just how robust the government infrastructure is for some of this stuff. The willingness and ability to adopt technology and identify all of their citizens with digital technology seems much more advanced than we have in the US. And then in markets like Brazil, seeing just all the ways that fraud is an entire industry. So seeing the way that people understand how to game systems, it's a very similar idea to how you have to design smart contracts. Because when you design smart contracts, it's it's almost adversarial, where you're thinking like, what are all the ways somebody could try to exploit this? It's the same way that you actually have to design like a banking or identity solution on the ground for real people in a country like Brazil.
No, that's awesome. I think that's a really good point. I until you just point that out, it was not obvious to me either. But yeah, you don't want to set up where everybody's competing for the same audience in a zero sum game. If everybody's come up with their own identity solution, and interoperability is a key differentiator here. So
Mhm.
awesome. Well, with that, I want to thank you for giving us your time today and an amazing talk.